there were a number of objects that came in as soon as we were setting up and had done the protocols. And we were in a parking area right on a state beach by the Gulf of Mexico. And what was very interesting about this is the people who were there were just brand new to doing all this. And, of course, I didn't know at that point, this was very early, and 17 years ago, almost 18 years ago now, that we did this, if anything would happen at all. And then suddenly, just materialized in the sky, not far above us, were these really unusual red-orange pulsing craft that appeared that had sort of also a bluish corona to them. And they appeared, they didn't fly in, they just sort of appeared. And first we thought there were 2 or 3, and then we saw that there were 4 of them. And then one of them vanished. And I started signaling to it. We had been doing the remote viewing to contact the ETs that had come into the area and doing the meditation and remote viewing in consciousness. And we're showing them exactly where we were located. Now, what was interesting is that they were moving towards us against a very, very stiff wind. And if you listen to the soundtrack on the DVD that comes with this new book, you can see these ET craft moving towards us, even though the wind is blowing against them, which would preclude any kind of sort of a balloon or anything like that. They were totally silent. And as they were moving towards us, we began to signal to them. And I had, at that time, I didn't have the really high-powered lasers we use now. I had these really bright sort of searchlights, and so I signaled to them, and then they were signaling back, and it was very, very congruent. So they were definitely under not only intelligent control, but they were locked onto our group, and it was obviously what we call a close encounter of the fifth kind, which is when people make contact and plan to make contact and invite the ETs to interact with us for purposes of diplomatic open contact. And so as these vehicles were moving towards us, and I was signaling, I then said, I should make a triangle in the sky and see if they'll make a perfect equilateral triangle. So I started painting with this really brilliant light triangular, like an equilateral triangle. I pointed in the sky, making that triangle over and over again, and then they moved into exactly that formation. Now, this went on for 20 or 30 minutes. It was quite a long period of time, and what was fascinating about this is that not only was it filmed, it ended up being on the front page of the Pensacola paper the next day because it was seen from that whole area. We were just outside the metropolitan area of Pensacola on this state beach. And on site, there were unusual electromagnetic forms moving around us in the parking lot, which some people sensed. And there were a couple of women who saw this, and they actually jumped in their pickup truck and roared back to town. They were so freaked out because, again, this was a one-day training, and people, really, I think, didn't even expect to see a UFO, never mind have something like this happen. And most people were very happy and excited, but there were a few people who became a little bit unglued and left. And what this taught me was that the ETs, even though this was the very early days of what CSETI was doing to train people to become ambassadors from Earth to these civilizations, that these ETs, no matter when we've gone out, are very eager to reciprocate. They're very eager to respond if the people who are there are doing it for the right purpose and are doing it for purposes of contact and peaceful contact and open diplomatic relations. So that's, of course, the mission of the CSETI project, and we had apparently a very good team there, and luckily we did get some film footage. Now, there's a couple of different shots of this, and it's on this DVD that comes with the new book, Contact, Countdown to Transformation, which is at disclosureproject.org is really the only place you can get that right now. Now, one of the things that I say to people when this event happened is that there was another message that was sent, and that is that we began to, at the early stages, realize that there were these transdimensional aspects of it, not only in the remote viewing and consciousness realm, because I was seeing in my mind's eye the occupants of these craft, but then they were on site, sort of electronically, astrally projected, to use a concept. In other words, the subtle energy or essence of these beings that were on the craft that we were seeing with our eyes up in the sky were moving around us as these sort of scintillating forms in the parking lot and causing detectors to go off and things like this, which, of course, you've heard us speak about, is now something that happens very frequently, if not always, when we go out now and make this kind of contact. So this all started. This was actually the first, one of the very first mass-witnessed CE5s, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which, as I've explained, is a CE5 is when people decide to make contact to these ET craft rather than just passively and accidentally seeing one. So it was a very exciting thing, and I think that anyone who sees, Linda might comment on that since she wasn't there at that time. This was before her time, but anyone who sees the video can sense how exciting and how important this first early contact was.
Oh, yeah, it was really exciting for me to get to watch those original videos because the people were so excited. And another thing, too, attached to one of the videos after this initial footage was some footage from several members of the group, I don't really know how many, went out, I think it was the following weekend, just on their own to practice the protocols, and they also had some amazing contact. So what Dr. Greer says about the ETs being eager to participate if they can in making contact with us is very true. Even way back then, these brand new, novice people using the protocols all on their own had also some amazing footage.
Right, and really what I had done is teach them the meditation technique of going into deep silent awareness and then awakening in this state of consciousness that is the universal aspect of mind, and then practice seeing space and deep space and sensing where these ETs are. And then when you get a sense of it, you may feel it, you may see it, you then show them where you're located, and you sort of zoom in to your location and guide them into your site. Well, these people, there were a couple people who really were good at doing that, and when they went out on their own, they had further contact, and it was more than once where this happened. And in fact, there is some footage from another event that we have from when they were out doing this. And it just goes to show that now there are a number of things that are around this. One of the there was a major UFO organization whose Eastern director was there when this happened, and he was so astonished that he was going to write it up as a major report and article for a journal, and they blacklisted it, would not allow it to be published. And so much so that this person ended up resigning as the Eastern director for the whole United States for this very large UFO organization. What was interesting about that is that I later learned that this organization had a lot of ties to the intelligence community, and they did not want this information out, that you could make this kind of contact. And he was so astonished that he actually quit his position, and this was a person who was a colonel, who was a former Air Force pilot. There was another Air Force pilot who was there, I might add, and they both confirmed that these were by no means conventional aircraft or balloons or anything like that could be hoaxed, because of the kind of directional movements they were taking and the kind of wind that we were getting, very strong winds coming off the Gulf that night, which you can actually hear in the soundtrack of this event. And the other interesting thing that happened, which is a little bit of history, is that this went all the way up through the chain of command in the military, and it ended up getting the attention of the head of Army Intelligence and some National Security Agency people who, in the following month, invited me to a meeting in Atlanta to discuss what we were doing. Where basically they said, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" And, of course, they knew we had discovered the Rosetta Stone of contact. And from that, all kinds of things ensued where they were trying to either buy me off or threaten me or what have you. And this is in my book, Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge, those of you who've read that book. which is sort of an autobiography of my experiences over the years involving myself with this issue. And the other thing that happened is that there was a book called The Road to 2012, interestingly, and this is 1992, and it was written by John Peterson of the Arlington Institute on a contract for the Coast Guard, but it was intended for all the military. And in it, he issued some warnings about some wild card events that could happen in the future regarding a civilian group that would make contact with ETs outside of the command and control of the military. And in it, he gave exactly, he didn't name our group, but he gave exactly what happened there on the beach outside Pensacola as his example. And he told me later that when he heard of this event and saw the video and also talked to people who had witnessed it, that this was why he ended up putting that in this book as sort of a futurist view of what may happen down the road. And the book was called The Road to 2012, and it's a very interesting bit of history from the early 90s of what happened. Of course, here we are at 2010, early 2010, January of 2010, and contact is ramping up. So this was actually the event that caused that to be referenced for the military in this think tank's assessment of the sort of wild cards of things that may happen in the future. And it had all kinds of repercussions because literally the senior-most people within the so-called Majestic group who have been keeping all of this secret became very concerned about this. And really knew that the trans-dimensional aspects of the protocols that involved, a lot of times we get ridiculed, oh, well, Dr. Greer goes out and shines lights in the sky. That's the least of it. That's only the linear part of it and the electronic tones that we send out, at the beeping tones from the crop circles where the ETs had a phenomenon going on there in the crop circles where it was an amazing series of tones that Colin Andrews acquired and recorded, and we have now been using since 1992. But what was interesting is that, in fact, the real heart of the protocol is this transdimensional understanding of reality, where you understand that anything that can travel faster than the speed of light crosses into the conscious universe that is in energy fields that correlate very closely to the so-called astral body or the lucid dream state or the ability to go into deep meditative states in remote view. And many people find this rather mysterious, but I tell folks, I said, look, everyone's had a flying lucid dream where they fall asleep and then they're flying somewhere. They're literally traveling with this body of light, the astral body, and this is well known in the Puja Vedic literature, since we're on the World Puja Network. And if you study this, which many societies have, in the Aboriginals of Australia, this sort of dream time and seeing through the dream state is considered very normal, and how they communicate with each other at night. This has been done by civilizations and people since humanity has existed. Now, our materialistic, reductionistic, linear society has forgotten a lot of this, but it doesn't mean it still isn't useful. And in this case, because the ET civilizations have electronic systems that interface with that kind of coherent, lucid thought capacity, that if you learn to do the meditation correctly and you learn to do the remote viewing and then lock onto their electronic systems, you can guide them into your location and make contact. And that's the core of what we're doing. Although it's the part of it that's most controversial, the people within the intelligence community who've studied this for many decades knew that this was the Rosetta Stone of contact, and they were not happy because, I was literally courted by the head of Army Intelligence and his coterie, and then later threatened. And what I find interesting about this is that since now we've trained thousands of people to do this, that people literally in this one-day workshop learned how to do it, went out and did it, and had contact happen. So it's something that in a sense, the genie's out of the bottle. And this is why we're telling people, come if you can to Boca Grande and be trained to do this. If not, we have all the meditation and instruction materials on the website. They're very inexpensive. It's not like it's thousands of dollars. I mean, it's like $10 for the meditation CD and whatnot at disclosureproject.org, so that you can go there and learn these meditation techniques and also the remote viewing protocol for contact. And then if you have a laser or light, and you can get the tones from the website as well, these beeping tones, and go out and play them on a portable DVD player and transmit them over radio signals, you can do everything we're doing. And so I tell people, go and practice this, and you might be very surprised what happens, because people who have done this have literally had craft appear in their backyards and overhead and what have you. So it's a very interesting development, and it all started with these early expeditions that we did, and one of the very earliest ones, not the first one, this was like the second one, though. The first one was in Belgium, actually, when the big triangles that were flying out over Belgium. We can talk about that in another time, perhaps, but this was in 92, and it was in Florida, and I really think that people, when you read this new book, Contact, the Countdown to Transformation, that has the DVD with it that shows how these ET craft have appeared and the kinds of sounds and tones they've sent to us and the kinds of events that have transpired, you'll have a really full understanding of how you can do it and what kinds of things to look for, what kinds of manifestations of higher ET intelligence, how they really appear around us, because it's not always like out of a Steven Spielberg movie. It's often very unusual things, but understandable once you get a good